10 scary videos you should never watch alone. Real horror footage that still can't be explained. The video started with scream, short, sharp, and cut off halfway. The camera shook as someone ran down a long, dark hallway, their flashlight flickering wildly. A door slammed. The picture froze. Then a single frame flashed, a pale face pressed against a lens, eyes wide open, mouth stretched into a silent cry. That was the last image before the screen turned black. It was only supposed to be part of a YouTube countdown called 10 Scary Videos You Should Never Watch Alone. But what made this different was that no one could trace where those clips came from. They weren't movie scenes. They were real. Each one looked like it had been filmed by someone who didn't make it out. And this particular video, the one people now call the hallway footage, had a strange pattern. Everyone who tried to watch it alone claimed something impossible. The sound of footsteps echoing behind them while the video played. By the time police tried to investigate the video's uploader, the account was gone. Only a few copies existed on mirror channels and horror forums. The uploader's last message read, "If you're hearing this, it's already too late." But the real story began long before that upload, inside an abandoned house outside Columbus, Ohio, where a group of college film students discovered an old box of mini-DV tapes marked only with numbers, 1 to 10. They didn't know it yet, but those were the same clips that would later make the entire internet uneasy. The group's leader was Dylan Carter, a 21-year-old film major who loved exploring forgotten places. Along with his friends, Lena, Kyle, and Ben, they were shooting a short documentary about haunted locations for their class project. They had heard rumors about a farmhouse that once belonged to a retired mortician named Henry Lowell, a man who mysteriously disappeared in 1984 after being accused of grave theft. The property had been empty for decades, but locals swore they still saw lights moving to the windows at night. When Dylan's team arrived, the place looked exactly like a horror movie set. Broken windows, vines crawling up the walls, and a wooden keep-out sign barely hanging by one nail. The air smelled of wet wood and rust. They started filming their intro clips outside, laughing nervously to ease attention. Nothing unusual happened until they stepped inside. The living room floor was covered in old furniture, stacked TV sets, and piles of videotapes. It looked like someone had been recording something over and over for years. In the corner, a small television still played static, even though it wasn't plugged in. Lena thought it was some kind of electromagnetic trick. Dylan brushed it off as weird wiring. But Ben swore he heard faint whispering coming from inside the TV. That was their first mistake. They stayed to check. As they searched the rooms, Dylan found a box with 10 small tapes labeled "Do Not Watch Alone." Each tape had dates from the early 2000s. On one of them, a piece of masking tape was stuck on top with the words "St. Clair File." When Kyle tried to play it in his handheld camcorder, the footage started with a group of people walking through what looked like an empty hospital. The sound was muffled, the video grainy. But then something moved in the corner. A shadow in a hospital gown, walking backward down the hallway. They laughed it off as an old film project. But when Lena paused a frame, her face went pale. There, behind the group, was a reflection in the window, someone holding the same camcorder model they were using. Dylan took the tape out immediately, but the screen didn't go black. The camcorder kept playing by itself, showing a countdown from 10, 9, 8, as if something was being recorded live. Everyone froze. The only sound was a faint ticking of a wall clock that hadn't worked in decades. Then, from upstairs came the sound of a chair scraping. Kyle yelled, "Someone's here!" and ran toward the staircase, his flashlight bouncing off the cracked wallpaper. When he reached the top, the light flickered, and they all heard it, a whisper, close and breathy. "You shouldn't have watched." The flashlight died. A loud crash followed, and Kyle screamed. The sound was sharp, like glass breaking and something heavy falling. Dylan and Lena ran up the stairs, shouting his name, but the hallway was empty. Only his camera lay on the floor, its lens cracked. They replayed the footage on Kyle's camera, hoping it caught something, but the screen was full of static, until the very last frame. It showed Kyle standing in the same hallway, staring directly into the lens. Behind him, faint and gray, was another version of him, smiling. Panic set in. Dylan grabbed the box of tapes, determined to leave and hand everything to the police. But when they reached the front door, the knob wouldn't turn. It felt locked from the outside. The static sound from the TV downstairs grew louder, turning into words that looped. You were never meant to see this. Lena ran to the window to call for help, but the yard was gone. Instead of the open field they came through, there was now a thick fog covering everything, like the house was floating in a sea of mist. Then the TV shut off by itself. Silence. They looked around, realizing the entire house felt different. The air was heavier. The lights from their flashlights didn't reach as far as before. Dylan checked his watch. It was only 7:45 p.m., but his phone showed 3 a.m. That was when the first tape in the box ejected itself and fell to the floor. Its label glowed faintly under the light. Tape 1. The title read, The Hallway Footage. Dylan picked it up. The tape was cold, even though the room was warm. Against every instinct, he slid it into the camcorder again, and the screen lit up. A hallway appeared, the same one from earlier, but this time, the person holding the camera wasn't any of them. The image shook violently, and a distorted face appeared, too close to the lens to make sense of. Then the voice returned, this time clear and slow. You watched it, now it's your turn. Before they could react, the hallway lights in the house turned on by themselves, every single bulb flickering to life. Footsteps echoed from the upstairs landing, one by one, coming closer. Dylan's camera caught a shadow stretching down the stairs, taller than any of them. Lena whispered, trembling, "It's him, the one from the tape." The steps stopped halfway down. The house went dead silent. And then 3 loud knocks on the wall, each one shaking the entire house. That was the last thing recorded before the footage cut to black. The first knock was loud enough to make the lights flicker. The second one cracked the wall paint. The third made the camera fall from Dylan's hand. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. Then the whispering started again, soft, coming from every direction at once. It was saying something over and over, but none of them could understand it. Lena gripped Dylan's arm. "Let's just go," she shouted. Ben was already at the door, yanking as hard as he could, but it wouldn't move. It felt like the handle was being held from the other side. Then, suddenly, all the lights went out, leaving only the glow from the camcorder. The camera pointed straight toward the stairs. There, halfway down, stood a figure. Its skin was pale like wet paper, and it swayed slowly side to side, like it was breathing. No eyes, no face, just a smooth shape of a head that tilted toward them, as if it could still see. For a long moment, everyone froze, too scared to move. Then Ben threw his flashlight, and it hit the wall. When they looked back, the figure was gone. Lena began to cry, whispering, "This can't be real." Dylan, shaking, picked the camera back up and said, "We have to find another way out. Basement, window, anything." He turned toward the hallway that led to the kitchen, and that's when they saw something new. Every door in the house had opened, all at once. From the kitchen came a faint humming sound, almost like someone tuning a radio. They followed it, stepping slowly through the narrow hallway. The kitchen was empty except for an old VHS player sitting on the counter, plugged into nothing. It was humming softly. The display showed the number 259, blinking again and again. "Wait," Dylan whispered. "That's the same time for my phone." Then the player ejected a tape by itself. The label was nearly torn off, but one word was still visible: basement. Lena backed away. "Don't play it." But Ben, desperate for answers, slid it into the camcorder. The screen filled with static, then showed a dimly lit basement with dripping pipes. The camera moved slowly toward a wall covered in old photographs. Every picture showed the same people, the film students themselves, only older. Some photos showed them in the exact clothes they were wearing right now. Dylan felt the air go cold. "That's impossible," he whispered. The camcorder began recording by itself again, the red light flashing. A voice, low, drawn out, spoke from the speaker. "You're almost done watching." Ben dropped the camera, but it didn't stop filming. The footage now showed the basement again. Only this time it wasn't a tape. It was live. They could see themselves standing there, terrified, on the small screen. And then, behind their digital reflections, something moved in the corner, a shadow, crawling up the wall. The camera zoomed in on its own, even though no one touched it. The shadow's movements grew faster, twisting as if trying to take shape. Then the voice spoke again, sharper now. "Look closer." Lena screamed as the shadow stretched across the ceiling and dropped to the floor. The lights exploded in a burst of sparks. Dylan grabbed her and pulled her toward the back door. Ben followed, stumbling through the dark, shouting for help. They reached the door, and it opened. Cold air hit their faces. They didn't think twice. They ran. Outside, the fog was even thicker. The world looked faded, colorless, like an old photograph. Their car was gone. The road wasn't there anymore. Just endless trees, quiet and unmoving. "Where are we?" Lena asked, her voice shaking. Ben turned in circles, pointing. "We came through that field. Where's the house?" But when they looked back, the house wasn't behind them. There was only fog. Then they heard the hum again. It came from somewhere ahead, deep in the woods, and under it, a faint clicking sound, like a tape rewinding. Dylan raised the camera, and through the mist, they saw faint lights flickering. It looked like another building, maybe a small cabin. With nowhere else to go, they moved toward it, their shoes crunching on dead leaves. The sound grew louder. As they got closer, they could see the shape of a door and a faded sign above it that read, "St. Clair's Psychiatric Research." Lena gasped. That's the same name from the tape. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air smelled like chemicals and mold. Rows of metal beds lined the hallway, and old patient charts were scattered across the floor. Dylan's camera started to glitch again. Bright flashes of light, distorted images, and faces that didn't match theirs appearing for a second at a time. In one flash, they saw Kyle, their missing friend, standing at the end of the corridor, holding the same box of tapes. He looked right at them and mouthed the words, "Don't finish watching." Then the light flickered and he vanished. Lena collapsed to the floor, shaking. "He's alive. We have to find him." Ben grabbed her hand and pulled her up. "No, we're leaving. Now." But the hallway began to change. The walls seemed to move closer, stretching and bending as if breathing. The fluorescent lights above buzzed louder and louder. From behind one of the doors came a faint crying sound, like a woman whispering names. Dylan, against all fear, turned the handle. The door opened into a small patient room. On the bed was a dusty TV still turned on, showing static. But there, faintly through the noise, was the same hallway they stood in, only it looked older, cleaner, and brighter, like time itself had reversed. On the TV, a nurse walked past the camera, humming the same melody they had heard outside. Behind her, in the reflection of a metal tray, stood the faceless figure again, closer this time. The humming stopped. The TV went black. Then, on the walls around them, words began to appear in red dust, one letter at a time. T-A-P-E3. Before they could react, every light in the hospital shut off at once, and from the dark hallway came the same 3 knocks they heard back in the house, slow, heavy, and close. Lena whispered, "It followed us." The last thing Dylan's camera recorded was a red recording light blinking in the darkness as footsteps approached. The sound grew louder, closer, until the camera caught a glimpse of something stepping into view, a human shape dragging a film reel behind it, the tape unraveling across the floor. The voice returned one last time, whispering through the static. "You watched it. Now it's watching you." The camera hit the floor. The screen turned to static.